Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and we are back, hopefully, with another archetype. I mean, obviously, we're back with another archetype, but hopefully, the videos will continue going normally now. But who knows? Everything's crazy. Anyway, today's archetype is going to be a very interesting one, as it's the first in its line of the. Oh, goodness, how to put it? There's not even a term for it, technically. They're archetypes that change your character's ancestry in a way, I suppose, is the best way to look at it. You become something else. Now, granted, you still maintain everything from your ancestry and your heritage, but you also just become something else. And in the game currently, at the very least, these types of archetypes make you undead in some form or another. And the first one we're doing today is the Ghost Dedication, which allows you to turn into a ghost. I'm going to preface this ahead of time. I don't like this archetype. There's a lot of things I feel make it much more complicated. This is very niche. It is a rare archetype, so of course your GM can and will probably say that you can't select this unless it's a very specific circumstance. But still, this archetype I feel causes more problems than it does benefits. Regardless, if there is a situation where your character would become a ghost, then I guess this is the way to do it, though I don't know how you would apply the dedication itself. Okay, you know what? Let's just get to the initial feat here and I'll bring it up. So, the Ghost Dedication has the prerequisites of you have died and returned as a ghost. There's, as far as I know, besides your character having some major unfinished business, no way to just like straight up return as a ghost or ensure that happens. So it has to be something that you and your DM essentially agrees on. That's not necessarily a big problem, but I do find it interesting that it is what it is. Now, there's a lot of text that you can see here, and I'm going to try my best to break it down to make it as simple as possible. So, you become a ghost with some of the benefits and some changes, but not a ton of changes. For instance, you gain the basic undead benefits, which means you now instinctively know Necro somehow, but you can speak to the dead. You gain low light vision or dark vision if you already had low light vision. You gain negative healing, which means you take damage from positive effects that deal damage, and you gain health from negative effects that give healing. And you also become immune to negative damage, and you can now take positive damage. So that's very important. And this is something I should mention as well. It's not that negative damaging effects heal you. You just do not take damage from negative damage, and if it does provide healing, you can heal from it. Vice versa, if a healing effect does not do damage, you do not take damage. But if it does do damage to undead, typically, then you would take that damage. More or less. Pretty simple. You gain this new trait called negative survival, which just means that now as a ghost, you take dying levels when you go to 0 hit points, which essentially just makes you like any other character. You don't ignore that. Though you cannot benefit from stabilize, which is important to mention. And when you die, you're destroyed. We'll get to that here in a moment. You become immune to death effects. Though if a spell has the death trait, you can still take things like mental damage or the frightened condition from spells like Phantasmal Killer. You just don't take death effects from those kinds of spells. For some reason, you just get a +1 circumstance bonus to saving throws against disease and poison. So technically as a ghost, you can still get sick or be poisoned, which makes no sense. And you get Undead Hunger, which I guess for ghosts, because it does mention in the main page that your cravings are to settle your unfinished business. And with this effect as well, you don't sleep, but you go into like a catatonic state for 4 hours a day. and you do need some sustenance, I guess. But your sustenance, I guess, is finishing your unsettled business. So I guess what that means is that if you're not progressing, finishing your business, your character begins starving, which is kind of cool, kind of interesting, but weird. You also gain the incorporeal trait, which means that move through corporeal creatures. You can't attempt strength-based checks against physical creatures or objects unless you get some power that allows you to do so. Though this does allow you to affect incorporeal objects or creatures. And it says that they usually have immunity to conditions that require physical body, like disease or poison, or precision damage. Granted, because of the way that basic undead benefits are worded, it would seem that you just take those effects, and nothing is mentioned about precision damage that I've seen so far, which means I don't know what happens. I don't know. Nothing has stated that you are immune to precision damage, and because you're not inherently immune to poison or disease either, I have to assume that you take precision damage. So, yeah, I don't know. What's the point of being a ghost? You get like no ghost benefits, right? There's some more here. So you can float, which does allow you to bypass certain types of hazardous terrain, or you can avoid some types of difficult terrain. I guess GM's discretion. Also, your floating is a fly speed, but you cannot fly. You must remain at least a few inches off the ground, and you can take actions like leap, high jump, and long jump using your fly speed as your calculation for all this. I don't know. Floating it can be enhanced later. This is just a lot of guff, a lot of stuff you have to go through just to be a ghost. Items allow you can essentially attune to specific physical objects, turning them incorporeal with your form. And then if you were ever destroyed, they come back, they drop around the ground around you. Or if they become destroyed, they also just become straight physical again. This lets you essentially have items as you're dead. The good thing about this is if you take a weapon, it gains the properties of the Ghost Touch rune, allowing you to attack both incorporeal and corporeal creatures, which is nice. All unarmed attacks you get deal negative damage rather than their normal type, which means that if you have any stance that changes your damage type, it just does negative instead. And also, they're magical. So if that is relevant, they're magical and they always do negative damage, no matter what, as long as it's not their normal type of damage. Now, your strength is not altered by becoming a ghost, but as normal for ghosts, you can only use athletic-based checks against other incorporeal creatures, and you still apply your strength to like your weapon strikes as per normal. So that just means it doesn't change, but you can only affect incorporeal creatures. And last but not least, like any other ghosts, you must decide what your unfinished business is, and you choose a bound sites. So the long and short of that part is that you have unfinished business. If it resolves, you either pass on or you choose a new unfinished business if you and the GM agree. And then you get a bound site, which I find strange, because then how would you continue as an adventurer? It reads here, your bound site tethers you to the physical world and is typically either a location important to you in life or the place where you died. And so, yes, the Ghost Dedication initial feat, and we're so far into this video now, just because I want to anyway explain how this affects your character. The long and short of it is, you still have many of the same properties you did when you were alive, with some added benefits like the ability to bypass some types of difficult terrain, low light or dark vision depending, the ability to speak Necrol, and I guess a bonus against disease and poison, but you also are affected by disease and poison, which ghosts normally aren't, and I guess precision damage. And this one dedication just screams, we needed to turn you into a ghost for the purposes of story, but we don't want you to get too powerful or to gain benefits that make it unfair between you and other adventurers. So essentially, you're just like a normal person with some oddities here and there. Is there any net gain to this? I don't know. I mean, the bound sight thing really doesn't make sense to me, because how can you continue your adventure if you're bound to a location? This is very strange, and I feel like this will just get homebrewed by GM saying your bound sight is the party, so you can never, like move more than so many feet away from your party or whatever. But it's very strange, and yeah, I don't know. There's a bunch of feats, and so let's go into them, and some of them are kind of cool, but I'm just saying right now, the ghost dedication is really weird, and honestly, I just don't see this being a good option for most players. First up is Frightful Moan, which is actually a generally good feat. What it allows you to do is, for 2 actions, you can do essentially a demoralize in a 30-foot emanation around you, though it's enemies making a will save against your class or spell DC, whichever's higher, which means that, of course, undead magic casters are going to be technically a bit better at this than other classes. Now, if they succeed, they just become immune to the effect for a minute. If they fail, they become frightened 1, and if they crit fail, they become frightened 2. So, this is good for pretty much anyone who wants a nice AoE fear effect. If you're a barbarian, Terrifying Howl is honestly a lot better, but if you're not a barbarian, then this is a decent feat, I suppose. It's really good. It allows you to frighten a bunch of people. It's good SAS condition. Granted, because they're making a save against your class DC, if you're not a caster, they're likely to just become immune to the effect. And you can do this every round if you want. There's no limit. So, I mean, it's a good AoE fear effect, I guess, if you're not barbarian or bard who can get access to Dirge of Doom. Alright, next up is Ghostly Resistance. Now, you reduce your HP by an amount equal to your level, which is similar to the Drain condition in a way, but this is just reduced max HP. It's not drained or anything like that, but you then gain resistance to all damage except force and positive, and any damage done by a ghost touch property weapon by 1. And if it's a non-magical source, it's by 2. And at level 10, it goes up to 2 or 4 from a non-magical source. And 16, it's 3 or 5. So it does get a little bit better. The reduction in max HP is not a big deal, because you're going to honestly get more value out of this than how much you're losing. But this does mean potentially you could be down 10 to 20 HP by the end of your game just because of this feature for what could be 2 or 3 resistance to damage. So it's up to you whether that's valuable or not. In a singular fight with max HP, it would take a massive amount of time at higher levels to essentially get or to break even on the HP investments, if you're considering that most fights you're starting at max HP, which is a pretty reasonable thing to expect. So in actuality, Ghostly Resistance is kind of bad, but there's some good benefits to it, I suppose. Ghostly Grasp is actually not a bad feat, because it kind of removes some of the limitations you have as a ghost, but it more or less just makes you more like a normal character. Anyway, what it does is you can now interact with creatures or objects that are physical, not just incorporeal, which is very nice. Though if you are interacting with an object, you need to make a DC 20 athletics or thievery check. At level 6, that should be a no-brainer. That should be a pretty easy check to make, as long as you're at least somewhat invested in these particular skills. And being able to use your strength against creatures allows you to trip, shove, grapple, again, which is very, very nice. Now, the advanced undead benefits give you dark vision if you don't already have it. So if you do have it, you get nothing. You gain greater resistance to disease and poison, which is a +2, and you gain resistance equal to half your level to those things. So I guess a little bit better, but I think it would have just been fine to make them immune from the get-go. but whatever. And also, you now gain a benefit against paralysis and sleep effects, as you get a +1 circumstance bonuses to these. And again, the idea of a ghost becoming paralyzed is really silly, unless it's an effect that's supposed to paralyze ghosts specifically. I don't know. Very, very strange. Regardless, this is a good feat because it makes up a lot of the penalties you have for being a ghost. And there's really nothing to lose from this one other than a feat. So, yeah, pretty interesting. Next up is Ghost Flight, which once per day for 10 minutes you can fly using your fly speed that you have from floating, which is okay. It's not bad. And it pretty much just allows you to fly once per day as if you had a fly spell, which is not a bad effect by any means. And I can see this at least being a pretty decent effect, honestly. Like, ghosts I don't think inherently have flight, if I'm not mistaken. So, getting an effect like this is actually not that bad being a ghost anyway. Pass Through, another feat that I don't like and also doesn't make sense. So, Pass Through is 3 actions, and you can do this once per 10 minutes. And what happens is when you want to go through a wall, you just spend all your actions to fly up to your speed, and then you must make an acrobatics check of a DC 30, because I guess you have to wiggle through or balance your way through. I don't know how acrobatics is supposed to play into this, but it is. So you must make a DC 30 or higher if the material you're trying to go through is a more dense material. And if it's some kind of magical barrier, such as Wall of Force, you cannot go through it. But anyway, so if you make the check, you can go through the object and you treat, being inside of something as difficult terrain. Now, it says here when you succeed, you move through the object as if it was difficult terrain. And if you end your turn inside the object, you can only move out using Pass Through again or some other means of moving through a solid object. As normal for incorporeal creatures, starting your turn inside of an object makes you slowed 1 for that turn. Slowed 1 removes your actions. Pass Through requires 3 actions. If you ever end your turn inside of an object, you're forever stuck because you do not have 3 actions to use Pass Through with. Not only that, but if you're stuck in an object and there wasn't that slowed condition, you would still be stuck because you can only use this once per 10 minutes. Why? I feel like this is an error. I feel like they made Pass Through one too many actions. If it was just 2 actions, I would see this in a much better light. But as it is currently, if you end inside an object, you're just stuck forever until your allies manage to somehow chip you out or something like that. And the rules don't make sense. Also, you need to make an acrobatics check. So you can't even pass through things just for free or a ridiculous number of actions. You also need to make a DC 30 acrobatics check as well. So if you're not trained in acrobatics, you also have to be a master in acrobatics. I didn't even see that. You have to be a master in acrobatics to even pick this feat up. I don't know why. If they wanted to let you be a ghost, they just didn't let you be a ghost. It's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. You get ghost abilities kind of, but heavily restricted. So you're neither ghost nor normal character for no reason, like lore or thematically. There's no reason why this ghost form that you have is supposed to be different than other ghosts. And it's the balancing of Pathfinder 2E really making it rough for this particular archetype. And with the bound site already, I don't understand how this archetype would even work. It feels like this shouldn't have even been an archetype. But if you really want to play a ghost and your GM is allowing you to set like your party as the destination or your bound site, then there's just a lot of oddities that you're going to have to get through. Beyond that, Pass Through does allow you to pass through things as long as you have enough movement to do so. So I don't think it's inherently that bad. It's just a little janky. Next up is Rejuvenation, which makes your ghost character essentially immortal. Yeah, balance be damned, I suppose. So what happens is when you take this, as long as your unfinished business remains, When you're destroyed, you reform back in 2d4 days within your bound site, completely healed. And if your unfinished business is resolved while you're waiting, you pass on immediately unless your GM determines that you have a new unfinished business. So, yeah, you can be destroyed before this point and you just die, but now you just can't die, and as long as you remain in with this, as long as you remain within your site, essentially, because again, a bound site only has a limited range a ghost is supposed to go out of. So even if the GM allowed you to have a bound site but be able to travel freely from it, if you died like 100 miles away in 2d4 days, you go back to your bound site and now you have to travel again. I don't know. But you become immortal, I guess, as long as you have unfinished business, which is kind of cool. And at level 14, you get unlimited ghost flight, which allows you to fly. Now, you can just fly as a ghost as much as you want, but if you did take the earlier feat, which is a prerequisite for this, you can now, once per day, give yourself a 10-foot status bonus to your fly speed for 10 minutes. Now, before I really finish off here, I do want to state, they do have this box that does talk about the GM, of course, has the ability to remove or lessen the restrictions on ghost characters to make them make more sense. And they do give some rule workarounds for this. But I'm going to say that kind of invalidates almost everything, because all these restrictions are meant for the purpose of balances. So if you don't want it to be balanced, then you can remove those restrictions. But if you do want your game to be balanced, then I guess you keep them. It's just a weird stance. And the Ghost, amongst all of them, is, I think, the worst archetype dedication of this kind. It has way too many standard restrictions. And if those restrictions get lifted, it becomes one of the more powerful archetypes, because you get to fly. You just do negative damage with your unarmed strikes. So that means that most living creatures won't be able to resist your damage at all. There's just a lot of things here that give ghosts a good benefit that, if not restricted, I don't know. The balance sight thing is weird. The whole thematics behind this is weird. The fact that one of your feats can literally just get you stuck in an object and you can't do anything about it is weird. This is a janky archetype dedication. And I think they were just trying too hard to make it viable to play as a ghostly character. And they just ran into a lot of problems with the logistics of that. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. If you guys enjoy this particular archetype, I'll be more than happy to hear your stories down below in the description, or in the comments, or in the description. You can go to our Discord where you can talk about your particular Pathfinder characters, and as well join our wonderful community that's been growing pretty fast day by day. As well, we are getting close to our 3,000 goal here on subs, so if you sub, I'd appreciate it as well. But with that, that's going to be it from me. Whether you liked it or not, this is the Ghost archetype, and I am not a big fan of it, but, to each their own. That's the wonderful thing of tabletop. Anyway, good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.